Okay, welcome back to the deep dive. So if you've ever found yourself just, well, staring at this mountain of articles, books, notes.
Right, and feeling completely overwhelmed, wondering how on earth you make sense of it all.
Exactly. Especially when you're deep in academic research. Well, this deep dive is definitely for you. We are tackling a tool, a really fundamental one, that can turn all that chaos into clarity.
That's right. We're diving into literature mapping today, and our guide for this is some really insightful content from the Instagram account, Academic Practices.
Yeah, academic practice is brilliant. They really get straight to the practical stuff. And that's our mission too, right? To unpack their core ideas on literature mapping. We want to show you what it is, really cut through the noise about why it's such a game changer, and give you a clear, actionable roadmap for actually creating one yourself.
Think of it like building the ultimate GPS for your research journey.
Okay, love that analogy. So
Right.
let's start right there. What is a literature map based on what academic practices tells us?
Well, they describe it as a conceptual diagram. Usually it's visual, something you can actually see.
Okay.
And its whole purpose is to organize the main approaches, the key concepts, different theories, and, the significant research findings, all related to your specific topic.
Right. So instead of just this scattered pile of readings you have, you're visually arranging them and the ideas in them.
Precisely. It's genuinely about seeing the landscape of your topic laid out.
Oh.
And the source points out some really powerful benefits this visualization brings.
Okay, I'm listening.
First off, it helps you pinpoint the main themes, the big ideas running through everything you're reading, and even break those down into smaller sub-themes.
That sounds incredibly helpful already, like finding the major highways and then the smaller connecting roads within your topic area.
That's a great way to put it.
Yep.
Yeah. It also lets you directly compare studies and, crucially, understand the relationships between them.
So instead of just seeing study A, study B, study C in isolation.
Exactly. You see how they connect, maybe how they contradict each other, or how one builds on another.
Wow, okay. That changes things, doesn't it? It's not just about consuming information anymore, but seeing this, dynamic interplay of ideas.
Absolutely. And critically, this is a big one. This relational view helps you detect the gaps in the existing literature.
How so?
Well, when you see how everything connects, you can often spot what isn't being connected, or maybe questions that haven't been fully explored or answered yet.
Okay. So that's how it helps you figure out where your own study fits in. You're basically identifying the white space on the map.
That's a perfect way to think about it. It clarifies the position of your own research, highlighting exactly where you can make an original contribution.
Makes sense.
And finally, the source highlights that doing this mapping process lays a much, much stronger foundation for when you actually write your discussion and conclusion sections later on.
Oh, I can totally see that. If you've already mapped out all the connections and the gaps, synthesizing everything for those final chapters must become so much clearer.
Yeah, definitely.
It really is about visualizing what you've read to solidify that conceptual framework you're building.
And what's particularly interesting is the timing the source recommends. Academic practices strongly suggest doing it early in your research journey.
Early, before you even really start writing the bulk of it. That feels a bit counterintuitive, maybe.
It might seem that way at first glance, yeah. But the reasons they give are really compelling, and they directly address those common frustrations researchers run into. Think about why you, our listener, might need this.
Okay.
If your research topic right now feels just overwhelmingly broad, you go in 100 different directions.
I have definitely been there. You start reading, and suddenly the scope just explodes outwards.
Right. The map is a tool for focus. It helps you see the core areas clearly and decide where to draw your boundaries, where to concentrate.
Okay, that's a lifesaver. What else?
Or maybe the literature you are finding feels incredibly scattered. Or just, bewilderingly complex.
Yeah, like trying to assemble a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, but you've lost the box lid picture.
That's it exactly. The map imposes organization onto that complexity. It brings order to what feels like a chaotic library shelf.
Right.
And if you're still wrestling with formulating your precise research question, the actual process of mapping the existing literature helps you see patterns, see those gaps we mentioned.
Which then helps you shape a sharper question.
Precisely. It supports the formulation process itself. And here's a huge practical benefit they mention.
Yeah.
Having this map significantly reduces that need to keep going back, rereading your sources constantly when you're deep in the writing phase.
Oh, that alone sounds worth the effort.
Doesn't it? You've already got that organized overview ready.
Okay, so it's clearly not just some theoretical exercise. It's intensely practical for problem solving, for efficiency. Knowing what it is and why it's necessary, especially doing it early, feels crucial. Which naturally brings us to how? How do you actually do it?
Right. This is where it gets really interesting because the source breaks it down into a clear 5-step process.
5 steps. Okay, let's walk through them. Step 1.
Step 1 is foundational. Identify your core research problem and your key concepts.
So, what's the main question driving your study?
Exactly. And what are the absolutely central concepts or keywords tied to that question? These are your non-negotiables.
Okay, so if we were researching, say, green marketing, my question might be about consumer adoption. And the key concepts would be things like green marketing strategies, consumer behavior, sustainability perception, something like that.
Perfect example. Those core concepts and your central problem, they're the anchor. They often go right in the middle of your map, with everything else sort of orbiting around them.
Got it. Start with the core. What's step 2 then?
Step 2 is the systematic review of sources. This is where you gather your building blocks.
The reading part.
Yes, but systematic reading. You need to find current high-quality studies, peer-reviewed articles, key books, that kind of thing, usually by searching academic databases. The source mentions places like Google Scholar, Web of Science, Scopus, ProQuest, the usual suspects.
Okay.
But the key here is, for each source you review, you don't just read it passively. You actively extract specific important info. Title, author, their key findings, the theoretical framework they used, if any, and their methodology.
Okay, so you're basically creating these little structured summaries for every piece of literature. You're reading for specific data points relevant to building your map, not just general understanding.
Exactly. That structured information is the raw material you're going to arrange visually, which leads us to step 3, cluster themes and approaches.
Okay, clustering. So you've got your stack of source summaries. Now what?
Now you start grouping studies together.
Grouping based on?
Based on similarities. It could be similar things they discuss, or similar theories they apply, or even similar methodologies they use.
Oh.
Academic practices give some great examples here. You might group studies thematically, maybe under headings like environmental attitudes, or studies looking at purchase intention related to sustainability.
Or maybe studies focusing on ethical branding.
Right. Or you could group them by the theoretical lens they use. Maybe all the studies using, say, the theory of planned behavior, or perhaps value belief norm theory.
Gotcha. Or even just by method, like all the quantitative stuff here, all the qualitative stuff there.
Exactly. You could separate quantitative studies from qualitative studies. The point is, you're creating these distinct areas or clusters on your map where related ideas or studies live together. It helps organize the information visually.
Makes sense. It forms visually distinct regions on your map.
Precisely. These groupings form the visual landscape. Now, step 4, and this is where, the real magic happens, determine conceptual relationships.
Okay, relationships. This is where you start drawing the lines, right? Connecting the dots.
Yes. This is where you stop just grouping things and start actively showing how they interact. It's about seeing the dynamic flow between ideas.
How do you show that?
You use lines, arrows maybe, to connect interrelated concepts or approaches that build on each other, or even specific studies that directly reference or maybe challenge one another.
Okay.
And the source suggests asking yourself some crucial questions during this step. Which study is foundational for others? Which concepts are directly linked or seem to influence each other? And critically, which gaps still remain unexplained or underdeveloped in this network you're drawing?
Because identifying those connections and also the lack of connections is how you spot where your unique contribution can actually fit in, finding that niche.
Absolutely. This step isn't just summarizing anymore. It's about analysis and synthesis. It really paves the way for your original work.
Okay, that's powerful. What's the final step? Step 5.
Step 5. Visualize the map draft. Now you actually design and lay out this conceptual network you've built in your head or notes.
Bringing it to life visually. What kind of tools does the source suggest for this? Are we talking fancy software?
Well, they do mention several digital options, things like ResearchRabbit, Litmaps, MindMeister, or even Notion can work.
Okay.
But importantly, they're careful to include traditional methods too. A large sheet of paper, a whiteboard, even a board covered in Post-it notes can be incredibly effective.
Yeah, sometimes low-tech is best for brainstorming.
Right. And they emphasize that the key is functionality over flashiness. A beautiful map you can't actually understand or use isn't helpful.
Absolutely. Functionality first. So what does the visualization actually look like?
Think of your key concepts and those study clusters as the nodes in a network.
Like junctions on a map.
Exactly. And the relationships you identified in step 4, those are the lines or edges connecting them. You can use visual cues, different colors for different themes, maybe icons or symbols to help reinforce your groupings or highlight really key studies or concepts.
Okay, so you've gone through the 5 steps. You've built this visual representation of the literature landscape. But that's not the end of the story, is it?
Yeah.
What do you actually do with this map once it's created?
That's a really critical point the source makes. The map isn't meant to be this static artifact you create once and then, just file away.
It's a living document.
Exactly. They list several key actions to take after you have your draft. First, and maybe most importantly, keep it updated.
Ah, right, because research never stands still. New papers are published constantly.
Precisely. So as you find new relevant sources, you need to integrate them into your map. This might mean refining connections, maybe identifying new themes that emerge, or even spotting new gaps.
Makes sense. What else?
Second, use the map directly as a guide when you're writing, especially, they know, for that crucial conceptual framework section of your thesis or article. It basically serves as a dynamic visual outline.
Oh, that must be a massive help when you're actually in the weeds of drafting that section.
It saves so much time and really keeps you focused on the key relationships you identified. Third, share it.
Share the map.
With who?
With your advisor, your supervisor, maybe colleagues working in a similar area. The map is a powerful communication tool. It's often one of the most effective ways to quickly and clearly explain the landscape of your research and where you see your work fitting in.
Yeah, I can see that. A picture really is worth 1,000 words when you're trying to explain complex research relationships. Much quicker than trying to describe it all verbally.
Totally. They can see your vision almost instantly. And finally, use it for self-assessment.
How does that work?
Well, by looking at your map, you can easily see which areas of the literature are well represented, dense with connections and studies, and which areas might still feel a bit sparse or underdeveloped.
Ah, so it highlights where you might need to do more reading.
Exactly. Or maybe even adjust the scope of your study slightly if a particular area turns out to be thinner than you thought. It helps you spot the weak points in your own understanding or coverage. That's incredibly useful for just managing the whole research process. Okay, this sounds like a genuinely super helpful tool, but like anything, are there ways you can mess it up? Does academic practices mention any common pitfalls or mistakes to watch out for?
Oh, they definitely do. And these warnings are really practical, things to keep in mind as you're building it. One major mistake is simply overcrowding your map.
Putting too much on there.
Yeah, jamming it with too many concepts, too many studies. It needs to be readable and useful, right? If one map starts getting too dense, they suggest it's better to create separate, more focused maps for distinct sub-areas or related themes.
Right. Don't try to map the entire universe on a single A4 page.
Exactly. Another big one, and this goes back to that relationships piece we talked about, is merely summarizing individual studies on the map.
Just listing them.
Yeah. The map's real power isn't just listing who said what. It's showing the connections, the interactions, the dialogue between those studies, concepts, and theories. If your map just looks like a collection of bullet points scattered around a page, well, you're kind of missing the point.
Okay, so the lines, the clusters, the structure is often more important than just the individual nodes themselves.
Precisely. The relationships are absolutely key. They also caution against getting too caught up in the tools, especially relying solely on digital tools just for aesthetics.
Making it look pretty, but not functional.
Right. While the tools can be great, the main goal has to be functionality and clarity. A map drawn by hand on a whiteboard that you understand perfectly is far, far superior to some beautiful, complex digital map that you can't actually navigate or update easily.
That's a great reminder. The tool serves the purpose, not the other way around. The purpose is understanding and structuring.
Couldn't have said it better. And finally, and this ties back to those after steps, just forgetting to update the map is a really common pitfall.
Letting it become obsolete.
Yeah. The literature is dynamic, things change, new insights emerge. Your map needs to reflect that evolving landscape if it's going to remain a useful tool throughout your research process.
Okay, so pulling all these fantastic insights from the academic practices content together,
Right.
what's the ultimate takeaway here? Why invest the time and, let's be honest, the effort into literature mapping?
Well, the source beautifully concludes that creating a literature map isn't just about the end product, producing better academic writing, although it absolutely helps with that. It's also about transforming the research process itself.
Ah, so.
Making it more efficient, sure, but also, and they use this word, more enjoyable.
More enjoyable. Mapping sounds like pretty intense work.
It is work, no doubt, but it brings such profound clarity. The source uses this lovely idea that every researcher is on a kind of conceptual journey.
Okay.
And mapping that journey isn't just documenting it passively, it's actively clarifying and shaping your own academic vision. It helps turn what might be a fuzzy, overwhelming idea into a structured, manageable path forward.
Okay, yeah. I can definitely see how gaining that level of clarity would feel incredibly satisfying and probably make the whole intimidating process feel less daunting.
Absolutely. And the core message from their conclusion really resonates with what we try to do here on the deep dive, doesn't it?
How do you mean?
They say good research isn't fundamentally about how much you read, but about how effectively you structure what you read.
Right. Quality over just quantity. Structure over chaos.
Exactly. And the literature map is presented as one of the most strategic, powerful tools available for achieving that essential structure.
And that ties right back to our goal here today, helping you, the listener, cut through that complexity and get straight to understanding the most important information. The literature map really is a powerful tool for structured visual learning.
It truly is. It's such an effective way to take a complex, sprawling body of information, step back, and actually see the big picture, seeing not just the individual trees, but the whole forest and how it all fits together, or sometimes how it doesn't quite fit together yet.
That leads to a fascinating final thought, actually. If creating a map to see the connections between ideas is so vital for understanding academic research, what does that tell us about the nature of knowledge itself, how interconnected things really are?
That's deep.
And maybe more practically, how does visualizing those connections change the way you might approach learning any new complex topic, whether it's for formal research or just your own personal growth and understanding?
It really makes you think about looking for those links, doesn't it? Not just collecting facts, but actively trying to build the web that holds them together to get the full picture.
A really profound thought to leave you with. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive where we've unpacked the really valuable insights on literature mapping, all drawn from the excellent content shared by Academic Practices on Instagram.
Yeah, we really hope this gives you the confidence and maybe the concrete steps you need to start structuring your own research or really any complex information you're trying to get your head around.